Welcome to the Bankruptcy Matters interview series, organized and produced by the State Bar of South Dakota Debtor-Creditor Committee. In this series, you will hear from industry experts on the South Dakota bankruptcy process and how you can be involved in a growing area of the law. Please join us and our host, State Bar Past President Steve Huff, to learn more about why bankruptcy matters.
In this session of our Bankruptcy Series, State Bar Past President Steve Huff interviews Brent Thompson and Denise Langley, leaders from two of our state's legal services organizations, on the overlap between legal aid and the bankruptcy industry.
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate getting together and having a conversation about our recent COVID and even prior to the virus. The last couple of years have been sort of what I would call difficult, strained in our current tri-state economy. And so the genesis for these interviews, particularly with these service organizations, is to try and educate people on how there's going to be an increased demand for bankruptcy and debtor counseling services, and how the agencies can help the people that find themselves not able to pay their rent, not able to pay their medical bills, not able to pay for the necessities of life, and how they can seek aid and remedies through our legal system. So I want to welcome Denise and Brent, and I guess I would propose at the outset, I would ask Denise, then Brent, the following questions that I'm going to ask. And if there's any follow-up, or if you want to add further, I'll just let you continue to talk, or signal to me that you want to add further comment, and I will make sure that we get to that before we move on to the next line of discussion. So with that, I guess I would start with, can you generally describe each of your respective legal organizations and what they could do to help prospective either bankruptcy or clients that find themselves in civil situations where they may need counsel as a result of losing a job or difficult economic times? Denise, can you give us some direction on that query?
Okay, well, with Access to Justice, we are an income-based program, just like East River Legal Services. One of the differences is we have a second-tier income qualification category, where individuals that are over our traditional income guideline, but still within a higher bracket, can qualify for reduced rate legal services. So if they were over income for a pro bono, they can qualify for a reduced rate. But one of the main problems is when someone's applying for legal assistance with bankruptcy is, although they may be over the income guidelines for pro bono legal assistance, they still may not have the funds to participate in that reduced rate program. I think one of our second areas that I would say we have some difficulty with is that Access to Justice does not have staff attorneys that handle cases. We actually work with our licensed attorneys throughout South Dakota that volunteer for either pro bono or reduced rate cases through Access to Justice. And when it comes to bankruptcy, we already know we have a limited number of bankruptcy attorneys in our state. On top of that, I would say a majority of those that do handle bankruptcy are not handling it for the debtor side. So that reduces our pool of available attorneys. And one thing that I worry about is putting too big of a load on those attorneys that do participate in our program. Because what we like to do is match an attorney with one case at a time. And if they've had a particularly difficult or lengthy case, we may give them a break in between case matches so they're not closing one and then the next day we're calling about another. But I feel like the burden falls on the bankruptcy attorneys, particularly hard, just like the family law attorneys, because we have to just keep coming back to those same attorneys because they are all we have.
Brent, what do you, how do you handle those kind of dynamics inside of East River?
I mean, our approach is a little different. We have multiple approaches, actually. The first is education. So we've populated a few informational sheets and guidance like that that are available. Working on some more right now, in addition to other areas of the law. In addition with that, many of our clients who contact us, have a limited understanding of what bankruptcy is, or if they even need a bankruptcy, or what their actual rights are, especially related to consumer issues. So a lot of that, what we do involves counseling, first having those initial steps. I mean, I would say 60 to 70% of the people who contact us are judgment proof anyway. So, they necessarily don't need a bankruptcy. So our services revolve around a lot of conversations about that, having an attorney guide them through, whether they even need a bankruptcy or not, at that point. We have just started taking on bankruptcy cases here at East River. The attorneys have. To be honest, we've accepted very few, and it's definitely a need we see. That we're trying to acknowledge as a program and find resources as a program. We also place cases on a pro bono basis, with attorneys throughout the community. For us, bankruptcy spans across several of our grants. If you're within 125% of the federal poverty guidelines, or in some cases 200% of the federally poverty guidelines, we can do your case for you or refer your case. If you're an older American over the age of 60, we can do your case regardless of income. And I suppose theoretically we could take a bankruptcy under our victims of crime. To be honest though, I haven't come across a scenario where that would be possible. I imagine if you were the victim of financial exploitation, like as an elderly person or incapacitated person, we could theoretically be able to take your case under our victims of crime grant. And again, there's no income level under that grant. So this is an area we're working hard to expand upon. I would say it's a pretty high demand, as Denise pointed out. So we're working hard here to develop more resources to assist those people.
For those that you can help, what is the most important thing that a prospective client of your respective programs can do as of the time they get to your office? Is it some self-help education? Is it bringing a completed application? What are the things they can do to help themselves if they need services and could qualify? Can you give us some tips on that, Denise?
I think the most important thing is to have your information ready. Have your bills with you, documentation of that. If you have any liens, or active case files or active judgments against you, things along that. But have all that information for us. I mean, that helps so much. So much of an intake is doing the legwork and just, solidifying a lot of these issues and seeing really what the problem is, especially in this area, in the sense of a debt can be sold so many times and passed through so many hands. It can be hard for even the client or even us to understand what exactly is owed here and who's it actually owed to. So having that paperwork, having that documentation is a crucial first step. We all share the same intake system, so just going on that application, you should be entering all your information anyway. So that's generally not an issue. If there is some issue where you can't use that system, and you need assistance or want to do a paper application, you have that option. So in those instances, yes, having that paper application already filled out is also a big help. So,
okay. Denise, is that also equally true for your organization?
Well, because access to justice is a little different in that we, send the person and their case off to the attorney that volunteers for the case. Most attorneys that are handling bankruptcy kind of have a intake packet that they will automatically send the individual that walks them through the documentation they're going to need. It talks about the credit counseling, bankruptcy classes they'll have to take. And with our program, we don't necessarily need copies of all of their, bills and stuff like that. The application's fine, but we may inquire as to what type of debt they're looking at. Is it medical? Is it credit card? Just so we can pass that information off to the prospective attorney.
What tips would you have for attorneys that practice in the area but would want to affiliate themselves with your organization for purposes of, trying to do some of those cases maybe you can't take on because of income or for one reason or another, but are there any ways for attorneys not within, either volunteers for A2J or actually on staff with East River for private, public, whatever attorneys to get involved and give you some meaningful assistance in these kind of areas? Would you have some suggestions other than maybe just straight up affiliating with your programs?
I think it would be interesting to see some attorneys that handle bankruptcy on a regular basis volunteer for bankruptcy clinics for those individuals that are looking at filing bankruptcy pro se because either they don't qualify for legal services or they don't have the funding to hire an attorney. I have not worked in the field of bankruptcy, and I know the process can be intimidating, much like much of the court process for pro se individuals, but we do have clinics for a variety of other legal issues such as family law, filling out pro se divorce paperwork. So I think it would be awesome to have attorneys volunteering to work with pro se individuals on completing their pro se bankruptcy paperwork.
Brent, how about you? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. And at East River, there's a lot of opportunity to volunteer time and put source from effort without actually having to maybe take on the full extent of a full case and work that all the way through. For sure, sitting co-chair with one of our younger attorneys or newer attorneys to the area, just offering some guidance, working on, we're trying to create as much content for SD Law Help and informational content as we possibly can. We want to empower clients before an issue even starts. So taking the time to write a brief article, on that front, or even to vet existing articles is extremely helpful. That's one area where we just can't get enough help. So doing that, frankly, a donation is always much appreciated. And like Denise said, willing to do a clinic, or we're constantly being asked to engage in speaking, public education venues, and we're happy to coordinate that and work with that. So really, there's a lot of, it's wide open. As far as the assistance that someone can offer, I think both Access to Justice and East River, and I'm sure Dakota Plains for that matter.
So perhaps the idea would be to put something together, kind of parallel to a veterans clinic where there's a day where people just have, volunteer attorneys available for people either affiliated with A2J or with East River to come in and kind of do screenings and talk to prospective clients about whether the process would be helpful for them or not. Might be a viable option to help further along the organization's experience bases in debtor and bankruptcy work, but also to, get that kind of interest out there and the buzz, so to speak, so that people, if they do qualify, can actually go through your processes and, achieve some sort of objective that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do on their own. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's an opportunity for the bar to see, the need that's out there. I think a lot of them just don't quite understand, the types of the cases we're seeing. And I think there's a stigma associated with who we're helping. Quite frankly, from our statistics, our most common client is an elderly, elderly South Dakotan who has an extreme amount of medical debt. Middle-aged, hard worker in their whole life, properly saved, properly put away, did everything right. Now in their 60s, 70s, are facing 40, 50, 60, some cases even higher dollars in medical debt that they just have no idea what to do, and they're being garnished, and they're being told that their house that's paid for is going to come after, and they're, so everything you just said, Steve, is 100% right. But I also think there's an opportunity to see and I think gain some perspective as to what exactly the need is in South Dakota, and why this is so important.
I'd add on to what Brent just said. One of the things I experienced when I was practicing is that there is a misconception that, I as an attorney, I don't need to do pro bono work because that's what legal services programs are for. And a lot of attorneys steer and refer prospective clients that call but don't have the funding to hire them. They steer them towards the legal aid programs. But I think what attorneys in our state are missing is that our programs cannot handle the number of applications that we just cannot serve everyone. And having more attorneys on board from our bar in South Dakota that are willing to volunteer for clinics through our legal aid programs, volunteer for cases through our legal aid programs we could potentially increase it by more than we would have imagined for client services if we have more attorney involvement.
Don't get me wrong. If you want to give me the resources, I'll take all the cases you want. I'm sure Denise will do the same thing.
Sure.
We'll happily take all the cases if you're willing to pay us. The cost of doing that. But yeah, Denise is right. There's simply a huge demand and a very small supply. It's just that simple.
Well, then what would be, let me ask you both this, based on that last exchange, what would be the most, besides donating just straight cash, what would be the most challenging thing facing your organization besides just more resources that, people listening to this video who aren't seeking your services, like attorneys, retired attorneys, people that have gotten out of this practice area, can do to help your organization? Is there a resource? Can they volunteer to write grants for you? Can they just volunteer to be on the line more so you've got a bigger base of people and you don't fatigue the limited resources that you have? What's the best thing that an attorney could do or a volunteer could do for your organization besides the pure donation dynamic? Denise?
With access to justice, of course, it would be volunteering for at least one case each year.
Okay.
Again, with East River, there's lots of ways. Volunteering to serve on our board or on one of our board committees. Again, vetting or writing an article, taking on an educational event. Maybe shepherding a young attorney on a case. In short, the demand is so high that we sure can accommodate any willingness to help. I just reach out and have the communication with myself or one of the programs and just ask, what can we do? There's a lot you can do. More than I can think about in this conversation right now, frankly. Maybe you want to sponsor someone for a training. Maybe you want to share some previous trainings you have. But those things are expensive and much appreciated. So for sure, yeah, there's lots of ways you can assist us. Helping those people who need our services. So for sure.
Are there things on the horizon that you see that other practitioners in the area should be ready for?
I think overall, just to kind of circle back to what I said, I think we not just in South Dakota or as attorneys, but I think generally as a society, I think we need to refocus and reshape what our perception of poor is. So I think our preconceived notions and thoughts about what a poor person is or who needs our services, is out of date and no longer accurate. Again, we're seeing people who have never had to contact legal services, especially in the time of COVID. We're seeing people who've never had to contact legal services before. They've never had to apply for public benefits before, unemployment before, search out healthcare in the marketplace. Things people have never had to do before. Once firmly established, economically stable citizens, are finding themselves in financial crisis. And that's what East Rivers here is, and legal services generally here is here to help. navigate those systems and provide assistance, so that they can maintain economic stability. So I think this generally maybe just being aware and informing yourself of actually what's going on out there, I think is a crucial first step. So I think that's the first place to start, is just reassessing, what your preconceived conceptions are and what you can do to really get in there and help, I think is an important first step.
With access to justice, if we can just get more attorneys to be aware of how dire the situation is in South Dakota and across many other states in terms of the need for legal services and the capacity of legal services programs to serve all of those individuals, which they can't. If we can bring more awareness to that and get more attorneys to volunteer in some capacity, even if they cannot take a case, perhaps they can participate in one of the clinics like Brent and I talked about, or in some other capacity that would help each individual legal services program. And then of course, looking at donations as well, for example, as another option. I wanted to say that what Bill is doing with the law school, where they're trying to bring awareness to law students about bankruptcy as a potential practice area, is very much needed, and I'm glad that's going on, because we hopefully will have a few more attorneys coming out of the law school that are finding an interest in bankruptcy.
All right. Well, I appreciate both of your respective times. It's obvious we're all in this together. We need to support each other and make each organizations more efficient and expand their mission as much as possible, because we just have we're almost like taking on cases like they're coming out of a fire hose, and we need to do as best we can to make sure that we handle that kind of volume with as much efficiency as we can. So thank you for volunteering your time and for letting us know what your organizations can do for prospective clients. And I appreciate your time, and I guess that concludes the interview.